Start.
Okay, Jon, you're up.
Awesome. And just threw off the fedora, so we're ready to go. Let's do that. You can see my email. Yay. And Spotify. But that's not what I'm showing you guys today. I'm showing you today is the presentation. So hello, everybody. My name is Jon Hacker. I am the CEO and founder of Neurgear. And I'm here to talk to you about Neurgear and Choice 510, the Capstone. So what is Neurgear? Why does it keep doing that? What is Neurgear? Neurgear is a revolution. And I want to show you a quick video to elaborate a little bit more on what that is. So that may have shown you that what we're focusing on is focus, but to get a bit more of what we're actually doing and what I did for this capstone, let's move on to the next slide. So the goal of this capstone was to develop an ultrasound wearable to enhance focus and memory. This will act as Neurgear's first product, which is why I wanted to introduce all of you to them first. The plan in order to do this was to lead the Neurgear team and, make it. Pretty simple in concept, right? A bit more difficult in execution, but we'll get to that in a little bit. First off, why does an ultrasound wearable enhance focus? How does that work? We're not going to get too deep into this because this was not the focus of the capstone, but ultrasound stimulation is why. Ultrasound stimulation helps activate your neurons and cause them to go through action potentials, which in turn, those activated neurons can boost your brain function. Different brain functions too, depending on how you do it. For our case scenario, we focused on focus, which is why our device enhances focus and not, let's say, sleep. But let's get into the execution, the fun part of all this. How did we go about making this revolutionary device to enhance focus? Well, part of it was project management, which you can see the little Asana bubble over there. For those of you who are familiar, and for those of you that aren't, I'll be getting to that in a little bit. Some good old engineering in here in the lab. This lab actually, a lot of the times, a lot of late nights. And you can see what we started out with in this capstone. On the left here is this humongous head thingamajig, which we started with at the beginning. That didn't actually work either. That's the fun part. That didn't work. And on the right, you can see a working prototype that's a lot more comfortable to wear. It's like a before and after picture. And of course, as with everything, a lot of inspiration is required to get this working, a lot of brainstorming. So this is the team to help make it happen. You can see me in the top left, and again, one of those really uncomfortable headsets. Andrew's top center, he was working on the prototype there. Eckerma, top right, he's our electrical engineer. He did a lot of work with the circuits. Cole, middle left, he was our computer engineer. He helped with software. Middle right, Zachary, he did a lot of great work with design, which we'll see one of his pictures later on. Barke, bottom left, he's our chief marketing officer. He actually put together that video you saw at the beginning. That one that went through everything, that was his work. Awesome job. Emmy, bottom center, helps around with a lot of different things for the whole company, but also mainly focuses on that marketing aspect. Bottom right, you can see our team picture. But the thing is, we have a lot of people that are virtual, partly due to COVID, partly just because of location, which makes for not the best team picture. Why we have this collage in the first place. So let's move on. So the management, fun, learned a lot. So this is the Asana application. For those of you that are familiar, Asana is a task management app. And for others who are not, what that means is that you essentially make a bunch of actionable tasks. Let's say, give capstone presentation, could be a task. Then you assign it to a person, for example, Jon Hacker, on a date, today, 4/11. And that helps you keep on track to your goal. Specifically, I adopted an agile framework for management with a lot of brainstorming, inclusion of the different students as participants, because it just worked better. Students have a lot on their plates just with classes, which makes it really difficult to just say, okay, you gotta have this done by then. And then they're like, I have 3 tests that day, Jon, I can't do that then. Okay, let's move it out a week. A lot easier, right? It makes it a lot easier to adopt this agile framework. So that's what we did. Next, this is the result. A lot more pictures of the device in its entirety. You can see me holding one on the right there, my perfect hair day right there, 10 out of 10. On the left, you can see it plugged into the wall outlet, a more aerial view. This device actually worked as opposed to the humongous Clonkatonk, which didn't. So that was really exciting, that we do need to plug it out to all, that isn't a problem. I'll also be honest, I have tested this once or twice already, and I found that after a good 2 minutes of stimulation, you are focused for the next 9 hours, able to get on task and stay on task consistently. It was actually completely outside of our expectations going into this. Because for these type of devices, usually you get minimal levels of focus that have a very time-constrained effect. We saw the opposite. We saw very high levels of focus for a very long period of time. There's a lot more work that needs to be done, though, including testing on other participants and just, hey, here, John, along with making sure we can validate these results quantitatively in addition to qualitatively. This here is the picture I mentioned before from Zachary. This is our product look, what we're aiming for this to look like at the end of our development process. You can see we made some big steps from the giant headset to the current prototype, but we need to make a lot more in order to get it here. Sleek, non-intrusive, lightweight, effective with just the press of a button. That's what we're talking about, and probably the next 1 or 2 years, that's what it's going to look like, perhaps even sooner than that. So I talked a lot about what Neurgear did, talked about what we did, but what did I get out of this? What were my takeaways? Well, on a couple of different aspects. First off, I learned a lot about management, which is why I spent a long time talking about that. A lot of my time was spent there, and I made a lot of mistakes at the beginning. But I learned, and I grew, and I did better as time went on. Leadership really plays into that same aspect as well. Learning how to lead a team, how to inspire people to do good work, especially people that have as much on their plate as students, can be difficult. And I learned how to do that. Engineering, when the team couldn't be here, and even sometimes when they were, I was here late nights, engineering this thing into completion. That's the role of a leader. You have to pick up the slack where you can. Networking, scientific method, communication, all that humongous bundle of talking to people, meeting people, integrating them in our processes, and setting up the company for success. All of this was part of what I did for my capstone. So what's next? Well, for one thing, we're testing. Now that we have a working product, we need to make sure that it's really working as well as we think it is. And one of the ways to do that is quantitative testing as opposed to qualitative testing. The difference being there primarily is qualitative testing is I put it on my head and I'm like, I feel more focused. Yay! Quantitative testing is I put it in my head and then I take a test for 3 hours and I prove that I'm more focused. And I just took a test for 3 hours. I'm not happy. But it gives us numbers, which are important for scientific validation. Fine-tuning the device, we've got a couple systems that we want to integrate. So that's going to be a good next step as well. Clinical trials are something I've been in talk with the ultrasound engineering department on, and we might get something set up as soon as this summer. The final step, and probably the pinnacle of what's next, is raising capital. That's what transformed this from a student company into a revolution. That's the difference right here, right now. We have a product that works. We know where we need to go. We just need money to funnel into this to bring it to that next step. I wanted to also give you a quick overview of what my vision for this technology is, especially now that it's working as I can see it. First off, let's imagine for a moment I can get 5% more done a week using this device. 5% is actually a fraction of what I felt qualitatively when using it. But 5% is still pretty major. That's a good old 2 more hours a week to spend on whatever you want. You know, you could spend it sleeping. I would probably spend it sleeping, to be honest. I do not get enough sleep. But 2 hours a week, that's pretty cool, right? But then you get into the real, when the numbers get a little bit mind-boggling, because 6.6 billion more productive hours for humanity every week if we can get one on everybody's head. Today, we would have 6.6 billion more hours every single week. Honestly, that's too big of a number to conceptualize. I can't even imagine it. So we're gonna crunch those a little bit. That's around 73,000 devoted lifetimes of productive, focused work for humanity every single week. That's the equivalent there. Imagine if you could have 73,000 people doing anything 24/7. I'm talking 24/7 here, on any problem in the world for their entire lifetime, and it happens in a week. You could solve so many world problems so quickly. That's the potential of this device. The potential of the device is as a multiplier of human potential. And here's a real cool thing. We've built it. It's here. It's today. And you might be seeing this on market tomorrow. You might be seeing in just a year or two, like, oh, you remember that Neurgear thing? That's a device. I can buy it. I can be more productive. Yes, it's today. That's when the potential is. Anyway, if you're interested, feel free to join the Neurgear revolution. I thought I might as well tack this on to the end. You can visit our website at the QR code or www.neurgear.com. Get excited because we're hitting the crunch time. We're really going. Okay, folks, that's it for the presentation.
Okay, John, excellent. You did it in 12 minutes, maybe 13. Okay, so I'll take the prerogative to start the questioning. And my first question is, what do you mean by focus?
That's a wonderful question, because focus in itself doesn't really have a specific definition now, does it? It's kind of like focus means to one person completely different to another. So what we mean by focus is specifically executive function. It's your ability to keep yourself on task and to stay on task, to make that choice that, yes, I could be on my phone right now and that could be a dopamine boost, but I'm going to get a greater dopamine boost once I finish this work and I know I'm done for the day. That's what it boosts. And specifically what I found from the few tests that I've conducted with this on myself is it really does help with that ability to stay on task. So that was my answer there. We're also, for the trials that we're going to conduct, we're going to test a slightly different aspect of focus, just because it's easier, and that's going to be with an A-line, B-line test. What this is essentially is you got a bunch of dots on a page. Actually, I've got an example here. You got a bunch of dots on a page, and you have to connect them as quickly as possible in the right order. Now, is that useful? I don't know where else you're going to be doing that in life, but what it can do, and what this is commonly used for, is a test for ADD, ADHD, and it can be used as a quantitative measure of what focus is by the clinical definition. So that's what we're testing. What I've seen it have the most effect on is the ability to stay on task, and yeah, that's what focus is, at least as far as this device is concerned.
So to follow up, so you could look at it in terms of psychological concepps, or in terms of neurological concepts, I suppose, and there's got to be overlap there. So are you in, what are your concentrations in Zois?
There's a bit of biomedical engineering, there's a bit of neurotechnology and neuroscience, and there's a bit of entrepreneurship. Now, kind of makes sense for this type of business, right? You're adding them all together.
So what made you think that ultrasound would have an effect neurologically?
So we're not the first ones to do this. There's been ultrasound stimulation for a while now. It's in the literature, and it's shown to have psychiatric effects for different indications. Specifically, what's been explored so mostly is with regards to mood, and neurostimulation generally has been in regards to depression. In this case, all we're doing is we're changing the stimulation routine, changing the way that we're applying it, adding a little bit of extra spice to where we can claim IP, and then we have this device that enhances focus.
What's the neurological mechanism in play here?
You're shaking the neurons, essentially. You're kind of like micro shaking the neurons, and this is the most common of the ones that are thought to be at play. There's a lot of different mechanisms that we think are interrelated in this, but we believe that by shaking some of the channels, which are mechanical sensitive, we open them up, causing the ions to flow, which causes action potential. That's the current understanding, current consensus of the science.
Okay. Are you, as you pursue this, you've got the engineering side and the marketing side and all the economic side, but then there's the scientific, neurological, the biomedical side, right? So where are you personally? Are you?
So I started out on the science actually for a very long time. And when I first looked at this, I thought, okay, John, I want to make this device. When I was actually around 11, I want to make this device. So how am I going to do that? Well, got to go to the scientist route, right? They're the ones that do this type of stuff. And so it's been a long time looking into the literature, reading the science. For the gap year fellowship, which I had gone through with this business as well, I attended multiple conferences in the science, talked to multiple experts. We actually have someone named Dr. Kaiser over in the University of Nottingham, who will be on our advisory board, who's done a lot of great work in this space as well. The science is something that we can't just forget and leave behind, because that's how our device works. And too many companies in this type of space in the past have done that. And that has really led to them not existing anymore. That's the reason why you don't see this on market. though they were focusing more on electrical stimulation, which has a lot less potential than ultrasound for a variety of reasons, which I'm happy to elaborate on if you want me to.
No, that's okay. I'm going to give Meg a turn, whoever else. But if you're doing clinical trials on this, I'd be interested in participating.
Hey, that's awesome. Yeah, no, I'll keep you in mind. I'll write a note of it right here.
Great. Meg?
All right. Thanks, John. So, I have a little more context than everybody else here, just because I've been working with you and I know the kind of progress that you've made. I love the energy and the enthusiasm. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges of working with something that really is rather subjective? So you talk about, you put a lot of enthusiasm behind, think of how productive we could be as individuals, but also as humanity in solving problems. But that's if we choose to use it in that way, correct?
Oh, yes.
You talk a little bit about the subjectivity of it and the challenges, and then also a little bit, Stephen referred to, it's a two-part question, clinical trials. What are some of the challenges or benefits of going the route that you are as opposed to something that's really more medically focused?
So that's a lot of questions, but
I know.
I'll get to them, Meg. First off, with regard to subjectivity, that's always a difficult challenge. And this is something that's in the whole field of neurostimulation in general. How we solve that is by relying on the people who've been doing this for a long time, which are the psychologists. They help eliminate some of that subjectivity in these responses. The A-line, B-line test is from that realm. It's the reason why we use it, because it's a way to characterize and to make something quantitative that is inherently qualitative, inherently subjective. It's your experience of focus. So we're gonna make you connect dots and measure you compared to other people. That's how we do it. And apparently it works. So I'm good with it. That's definitely not my field of study. As far as your second point, what is the benefit of going more commercial route versus more medical route? And that's a wonderful question. It's regulation. That's the biggest benefit of going commercial route as far as to a medical route. Regulation in this space, honestly, should only be maybe a year or so to take effect. But this type of device is relatively new. Again, you haven't really heard of any devices that can enhance focus memory, guys, have you? I'm assuming not. If so, please do let me know, because that'd be something I'd be interested in looking at. So the novelty of this is going to make it very difficult to get by the FDA in the traditional pathways. But since this is a commercial device, it goes by a slightly different routine. It's still regulated, don't get me wrong, just not as harshly, which allows us to get it out to the public faster, and we can always look at the medical route later. That's one of the main primary benefits. Other benefits include just sheer numbers. There's a much larger market for this device in the commercial space than there is in the medical space. Yes, you could sell to HE, DHD, and ADD, but you can sell to them and people focused on productivity if you're doing a commercial product. So scale, regulation, and I would also say personally, one of the reasons why we entered the space is just my interest is the impact is a lot larger for commercial products. Medical products can get kind of stuck on the medical side of the divide once they enter there, and it's very difficult to escape. If you have any company that starts out in the medical divide, it's much harder to the commercial divide than a commercial company to go to the medical. And that's just based off the regulatory space. And once you classify a device as a medical device, you cannot sell as a commercial device anymore. That's just how it is.
One last question. Will the novelty wear off? And I don't mean enthusiasm, I mean efficacy.
Oh, the efficacy. So over time. So that's a great question. And the thing is with neurostimulation, I will mention something that I didn't mention before, which is called placebo effect. That's always an issue. Something like you're putting this device in your head and you're told by a bunch of studies that it's supposed to make you focus. Let's imagine the device in my hat. I will become more focused scientifically if I really do believe it'll make me more focused. And over time, if I continue to use it, that'll still work. That's just a placebo effect. That's something you have to control for. And that's something, again, you rely on the psychology there, not my field of expertise. I'm just going to shamelessly steal their work and use it as our foundation for this company. Because I mean, that's how science really works. On the other side of things, the novelty of the device, I actually have found from the first to the second round of stimulating myself, a difference in effect. And there's a lot of different variables there. But this is probably one of the greatest challenges of the device moving forward, is seeing, okay, so from person to person, there's variability. From stimulation to stimulation, there's variability, but that's kind of expected to. It's a subjective experience. Focus is not quantifiable, even if we really do quantify it. It is a state of mind, which is what we induce. We induce a state of mind.
Okay, well, I have a million other questions, but we want to open it up to Lauren and Dwane if they've got questions. And if not, then we can move forward. Thank you, John.
I have another question, but I won't, Dwane or Lauren, if you have questions, you go ahead.
You answered pretty much all the questions I had, so.
Yeah, you covered a lot of the questions that I had too, so I think I'm good.
So let me give you one last question. So focus is a little bit obscure, but productivity is also not. I mean, it's in the eye of the beholder to a certain extent. So when you say you become more, you expect people to become more productive via this mechanism, do you mean that they will be able to do more of what they are supposed to do, more quickly, or more smart? Is this supposed to make people more intelligent, more creative, more imaginative, or is it just focused on it doesn't affect that?
So here's part of the thing that makes that question really difficult to answer, I'll be honest, because IQ, you got an IQ test, right? If you were to wear this device for an IQ test, I would highly expect your IQ score to increase. Is that because I believe that you're smarter? Not necessarily, but just that you're more on task, that you're more focused on what you're doing. And by the current standards, that does make you smarter. So it becomes a thing that's difficult to separate. That being said, especially with productivity, the reason why I've said, and I'll draw from my personal experience here with the device from the 2 times that I've used it. It's because you're able to limit distractions around you. When you're using this device, usually I'll find myself like pulled away by 10 different things. I got an email going, someone texts me, I have to do these 3 things. The worry, the not able to be single-mindedly focused on what I'm doing causes me to be a lot less productive than I'm able to be. And I mean productive just by getting even this presentation done. But if I use the device and then do it, a lot of those, it just they seem to dull out a little bit. I'm able to focus my mind where I want to focus it on that moment. So I focus on the presentation, then on the text message, then on the social media, and I'm able to do better in all 3 tasks. This is actually a humongous thing in the productivity community and self-help community, where they look at, okay, multitasking is actually really bad because in the end, when you look at the science of it, if you multitask, you get less done than if you just single-mindedly focus on each task at a time. This helps you single-mindedly focus on each task at a time, and it doesn't stop you from multitasking, but even then it allows you to do it with more focus on each task. So I know that isn't the perfect answer, and I'll be honest with you, there aren't perfect answers in this space because it's the brain and humanity. There's never perfect answers. You gotta love it. There's so much subjectivity here, but that's what I've seen in my experience, and that's what I expect this device to be on a larger scale.
All right, thanks a lot. I have a lot. I would like to have another 30 minutes to ask questions, but we don't have 30 minutes, so let's move on.
I'm always happy to chat too at some other point. Just feel free to email me. I'm sure my email's somewhere.
Thank you. Dwane, it's your turn.
Okay. Can everyone see my screen here?
Yep.
All right. So this capstone presentation here is, as you can see, on a quick guide to mixing and mastering music. So some of the topics here that we're going to touch on, that I'm going to touch on are, as you can see, room treatment, studio monitor selection, monitor placement, plugins, hardware, equalization, better known as EQ, mixing practices, metering, mastering, and then of course we're going to open up the floor to Q&As. And I want to make a disclaimer here. This music is such a large topic that I haven't even covered maybe 90% of what could be talked about here today. So just want to make note of that this is a very broad topic, and I found this to be very interesting. So the first bullet here or slide here, we're going to talk about the purpose of treatment. So as you can imagine, I don't know if anyone has been in a studio room before, but in most cases, in most scenarios, you will see that there are many pads around the perimeter of the wall. And that is to ultimately mitigate room reflection, which is typically something they call the Hall effect. And what happens is when you're playing your speakers in a studio room or a musical room, you tend to get reflection, and that's pretty much the sound waves bouncing from the ceiling back to the floor, and it causes something they call a Hall effect. So that is the purpose of your padding and your treatment. The next thing is the correct sound reproduction. What you feed in is what you want to receive out, and that's critical for a mixing and mastering engineer when they're recording, when they're mixing their music, right? You want to make sure that everything has great tone and that everything is reproducing the right frequencies as you expected. Another reason for room treatment would be a musical sounding room, right? You want it to be nice and warm. You don't want anything over exaggerated, such as your highs and your mids and your lows. So you want to ensure that you have the appropriate frequency response and that you're actually hearing what, again, you're feeding into your signal. The next bullet here is comb filtering, which typically is a delay. Well, it's a fancy word for delay, I should say. And that typically you will hear in a larger studio facility, right? So in a smaller environment, you may get more of a reflection, but in a larger environment, you'll get the delay. And that's typically when you have 2 or more speakers that are playing the same output or the same sound, but on the receiving end, you're getting it from a different angle or a different area, and it comes at you at different times. So that's how that delay happens. And typically what you want to do is, again, have proper treatment to correct and mitigate that from happening. Next, crisp detail, clarity, imaging. That is all a process of proper treatment. Full dynamic range, full spectrum from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. You want to try and make sure you can get all of that full dynamic range as a mix engineer. And then, of course, you want the best mix possible, right? So you want to ensure that you're getting the reproduction that is supposed to take place from your monitors, and that can only happen appropriately with proper treatment. Last but not least, correct EQ decisions, which I'll touch on in further slides here. Next up, we have studio monitors, not to mix it up with like computer monitors. So studio monitors is another fancy way of saying speakers in the studio world. And ultimately, the main purpose of these components here, I should say, are for precise, high fidelity, warm sounding musical tones, right? And ultimately, these components or these speakers specific for studios can cost you the most money, unfortunately. And that's because they're probably one of the most critical pieces of the entire chain within a recording studio. As you can imagine, that's where you hear everything, and that's where you can make your changes, whether it be subtle, whether it be significant, but you want to ensure that if you're investing any money into or dumping any money into a studio, that the most of it goes into a studio monitor. The differentiating factors between many of them, right, is engineering designs, quality, components, frequency response. Some manufacturers may say, oh, we have a frequency range from 20 to 20 kilohertz, which sometimes can be false and overhyped. That's just obviously to make sales. So typically what you want to aim for are higher end monitors, and some of the names and recognized brands that I suggested are at the bottom here: Yamaha, JBL, Genelec, Atom, which is really high end, and Focal. Those are some really industry standard monitors that you'll typically see in a lot of high-end studios for that main purpose, appropriate reproduction and transparency. Touching back on the differentiating factors, I wanted to mention that another interesting component here is the power and the thermal harmonic distortion. And what that is basically frequencies or harmonic frequencies that weren't present in the input becomes present in the output, and that's what creates distortion. So the lower that percentage, the better the speaker is. And of course, they factor that into the cost as well. So next, you have monitor placement. So believe it or not, that is very critical. As you can see here, the monitors need to be angled 60 degrees apart from each other, but on a more of a angled, kind of like an angled dimension here, almost forming a V to the listener so that they can hear appropriately the proper stereo imaging from their left and right ear. Next, there are particular areas within the room where you need to place your treatment. So on the left side of the desk and on the right side of the desk, the first reflection and the second reflection points are between the speaker and the listener. And as you can see, that's where those paddings are on the wall for mitigating reflection. The third point, which isn't illustrated here, believe it or not, is right above the listener's head between the speaker and kind of like in the middle of the desk. And that is, again, to reduce the sound waves from bouncing up and then bouncing down, to eliminate any of that Hall effect that I spoke about prior. And then last but not least, in every corner, you can see there's something called bass traps. And that ultimately reduces resonance, which is amplified frequency of bass rumbling and so forth, which can be over exaggerated very easily because bass tends to vibrate. And what happens is in a room, sometimes you'll notice that it gets warm in a studio room. And that's because what bass traps does and how it works is that it takes the resonance and it takes the waves and the frequencies and converts the friction into heat, believe it or not. So pretty interesting topic there for bass traps. Next, we have hardware, software, and plugins, excuse me. So for mixing and mastering, you want to ensure that you have an appropriate Mac and PC that's up for the task. Typically, specifications, you want like a 3.5, 3.6 gig processor, at least 16 to 32 gigs of RAM, something that can actually handle what you're throwing at it and what you're getting ready to do. Because in efforts to make a good mix, you have to have something that can handle it, right? Typically what happens is a lot of engineers, mastering mixing engineers, they'll use plugins, and that can task the processor quite a bit. So hardware, 2 computer monitors, a studio desk, studio headphones, an audio interface, control interface, studio monitors. For software, that is up to the individual user, right? You can use Pro Tools, Cubase, Ableton, and Fruity Loop Studio. And just a note, Avid Pro Tools is the industry standard in the studio industry for majority users that use any of that software. And then last but not least, we have plugins. Plugins are what you use to improve the sound quality of the audio track that you're mixing or mastering. And these are some of the top brand names that you can use. You can purchase these plugins that you insert into your program of choice that you use to EQ and limit and compress and so forth the audio track that you're working on. Next but not least, we have EQ, which is equalizer, which I'm sure some or many of you are familiar with. You may have seen it in your cars before. Typically, mixing and mastering engineers, they use something called a parametric EQ, where you can adjust the frequency and the gain and the Q of each frequency response that you're editing. Next, typically for bass frequencies, when you're EQing any tracks or drums or low-end frequencies, you want to cut off or roll off the 90 hertz with a 24 dB per octave range. Next, you want to cut the muddiness for vocals so it doesn't sound as muffled, and that typically falls within the 200 to 500 frequency range. Typically, you want to do a negative 3 dB to a 5 dB cut. Next, typically you want to sparkle your vocals. So if you have a vocalist and you're mixing their vocals, typically you want to boost your 8 kilohertz to maybe 12 kilohertz to add a little bit of sparkle and And then you also want to boost the presence so that you can hear properly what the vocalist is singing. And that falls between your 4 to 5 kilohertz frequency range. And of course, you know, move your S's and your T's with a piece of equipment or software plugin called a de-esser that removes the sibilants and the T's and the P's and stuff like that. Here's an audio frequency spectrum just to kind of give you a glance at where particular instruments fall and where you can find the most effective ranges to adjust the frequencies for each particular instrument, and or what happens or what takes place if you increase, say, for example, your 300 to 500 hertz. That'll cause more muddiness and so forth in the piano section. So this is more of a reference table here for anyone who would like to understand more about what frequency does what. Things to know about the EQ. So be very subtle with it. Don't boost a lot. It's not necessarily meant to be the ultimate problem solver, but it does solve a lot of problems that you may hear. A lot of engineers rely on it quite heavily. Be aware that it's not mastered overnight. I remember when I started, I didn't even know what an EQ was. You know, I had to research and figure it out. And then the next obstacle is obviously learning what frequency response is and what each frequency does and how it affects what you do. It's used to balance the signal, make everything nice and even and not harsh. And as I've mentioned, every instrument has a fundamental note, as you can probably see here. So you have your violins, your viola, your cello, your bass, your trumpets, trombone, and so forth. Everything falls within a range of frequencies. So, you know, using such a chart as reference will kind of guide you in the right direction of where you need to tweak if you wanted to boost the violin or boost the bass, the low end, and so forth. So this is a really useful tool that I use myself for when I mix and master. And then next is the prerequisite of understanding frequency. Before you can really understand an EQ, you need to understand the frequency range and what actually each frequency does. Mixing. You've heard this terminology a lot. What exactly is mixing? It's
Wayne,
basically.
can I interrupt 1 second? Can you summarize and 1 more minute?
Okay. Yep. What exactly is mixing? It's the process of blending individual tracks in a recording. It's fine-tuning the sound of each instrument and or vocal. And obviously the best mixing tool that you can use are your ears. Next up, we have metering and levels. So metering is basically watching your levels to ensure that nothing is clipping or blinking red. That is something you want to eliminate at all costs. So anything in terms of audio production, you want to ensure that you're never clipping, because ultimately that creates something called a square wave, which is bad and causes distortion. Last but not least, we have the mastering topic, right? So what is the purpose of mastering? That ensures that the recording label, you know, the mastering engineer meets the specifications of the label, whether it be a streaming website, an artist, and so forth. It prepares the song for production release. It adjusts the overall loudness of the song, corrects tonal balances and imperfections and nuances, and then of course sequencing, spacing, and fading. And just to note, sequencing is placing the order of tracks in a particular way or how the artist or whomever the customers wants it. Last but not least, mastering practices. Master in a room that you're familiar with. That is critical. Do not make significant EQ boosts, because that can cause distortion or it can cut frequencies that you may not want to happen. Compare your masters to other masters' songs of the same genre. That's important so you can see whether you're in the same track or you're kind of close to industry standard. Use open headphones for frequency response and references. And then, of course, don't spend more than 30 to 90 minutes on a single song, because typically what will happen is you'll have ear fatigue, and then your ears will get affiliated with what you're hearing, and you won't actually hear if something's improving or decreasing in quality. All right, and we're going to open up for Q&A, and hopefully I have some time here. I do.
Steven, you're muted.
I'm muted?
No,
No, I was telling
Oh.
Steven he was.
We'll give-
I was
give you
gonna
the
say, oh no.
Imagine that whole time? No.
give you the 5 minutes, but I'm not going to ask any questions, but I would like you to take note of a couple of comments I have, which perhaps you can put into your paper, you know, in your product paper. You don't need to answer them now.
Okay.
One is, I would like you to explain what all this new quote new technology, how much better does this whole slew of technology that you've mentioned make the product compared to what used to happen maybe in the 60s when the Beatles were you know, recording their music. I'd be interested to know how much better the product is than it used to be because of all this new technology. That's one. And the second question I would like you to address, you sort of touched on it at the end. You know, when you're writing something, when you're an author, I don't know how you decide that, okay, this is the best it can be. I mustn't play with it anymore because this is the best it can be. I assume that the same thing happens here. How do you know when you're done? I mean, I know you said your ears get tired, so you have to stop, but maybe you want to come back to it later. I don't know. I'd like you to address that in your product paper too.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay.
Meg?
Yeah, Dwane, I've got a couple questions for you. So that was really interesting. Definitely outside of my area of expertise. So, you know, lots of great information. I'm wondering two things. One is this self-learned for you? So I know that this is not your full-time job. So I'm curious, or maybe it is, but I'm curious, how did you learn all of this? Obviously it's a passion pursuit, but so that's one question. And then the other question is, can you attach a cost to setting up such a dynamic music space as this? Because I have to guess it's rather expensive and I'm just curious.
Yeah, so for me, it's been more of a learning experience and shadowing experience, right? I kind of shadow some of those guys. So let me rewind a little bit. I'm from a musical background, from the Caribbean. They love music. That's what they do all day, every day. They have a ton of sound systems on the streets and they're blasting it. And there's a million producers in the little country of Jamaica, right? So, you know, you have your Sean Pauls and those major artists, Shaggies, who are really mainstream. And believe it or not, I know a lot of these guys, and I do know they're producers and they're engineers. So I task them a lot. I ask them a lot of questions. So that's where I get some of my knowledge base. But also it comes with a lot of trial and error, right? Because there are some guys in the industry where it's kind of like, hey, well, did you try it? Did you figure it out? Did you play with it at least before you come and ask me questions? But then it's kind of like, okay, yeah, maybe I should go try it myself. So I try it, and it takes hours and hours of practice, right? For example, EQing or an equalizer. I'm sure everyone has seen that at least one time in their life, and they've boosted the bass and boosted the treble. There's an art to that. There's a science to that. And it's just more or less trial and error. You try it, you click that button, you see what it does, and you're like, wow, I didn't realize it does that. So years of experience, years of studying, years of asking questions is how I've inherited some of the knowledge base that I have for mixing and mastering. In terms of the cost, I'll be honest, it will make you go bankrupt. It is expensive. It is expensive. I can't stress enough. Just to give you a perspective, just to give you an instance of how expensive it is, right? The mixing board, you know, the 48 channel big mixing board can cost you 30 grand, right? And then you have the speakers, which they call monitors, studio monitors. Everyone knows of, or maybe heard of, the DJ Khaled of music, or, you know, the Ariana Grande, who has their mixing engineer. Her engineer may have $50,000 studio monitors, and it'll automatically adjust according to what it picks up based on the room acoustics. That's how advanced that studio monitor can be. So it can cost a lot of money. It basically comes down to how much are you willing to spend.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So interesting. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, John and Lauren, and thanks for being here, Leonie. Are there any other questions before we move on to Lauren?
I've got a quick question for you, Dwane.
Yeah,
Do you have one of these setups? And if so, do you have a picture of it that you can show us?
I do have a setup. I have my own personal recording studio. I don't have a picture, but I will find one, and if we have time, I'll be glad to show it.
Sounds awesome. Yeah.
Yep,
Thank you, Dwane.
no problem.
Stephen, you're muted again.
Thank you, Dwane, and Lauren, it's your turn. You're up.
Okay. Let's see if I can do this correctly.
Looks like you're doing it correctly.
Beautiful. Okay, can everyone see my screen? All right, so this is my capstone project. My project is basically kind of like two parts. One part is a full detailed business plan for an online fitness coaching business. I got into fitness about 3 years ago and I fell in love with it. It's become a huge passion of mine. Changed my whole major to like concentrate in exercise science and everything. So I figured it would be kind of cool to start my own business with this. I'm currently a personal trainer that does in-person training at a small gym. So I wanted to branch out and see if I could actually do this on my own. The second part to this is a sample program, which basically goes through the whole process of creating a personalized program for someone. And I'm, like I said, very passionate about this. So I wanted to do the best I can with creating my own business here. So the business plan, it gives kind of just a good insight of how much actually goes into creating a business. And I gained a lot of insight on what actually goes into just making a business plan. Unfortunately for this project and the time that we have, I'm not able to get the whole business off the ground and get everything going just for time constraints, but it is a lot of hard work and a lot of things that just go into creating a business in itself, which I was unaware of before I started this. So like I said, my coaching business would be called Coach by Lauren. It'd be an online fitness coaching business. So the components of this would be, we have the executive summary, which is basically like the vision, the mission statement, everything kind of why I'm doing this, why I'm starting this business. We have the company background, which goes into the description of my company, any market opportunities, what I'm actually selling, so my products and services, which would be the online coaching service. And we did a SWOT analysis, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and legal stuff. So creating an LLC, what insurances do I need, any legal components to make sure that I'm doing a business properly. And then we have the management aspect, which is basically who the owners are, which currently is just me. So I'm trying to start this business currently on my own. There are definitely opportunities to bring in marketing people on my side or financial people on my side. Right now, it's just me though. And then we have things like how I'm going to run the business, like how I'm going to take care of the financials and the marketing aspect of it. So we have that strategic management kind of side. And then Porter's 5 forces, which is basically looking at level of supplier power, the intensity of like the competitive landscape of the market, access to the market or to new like opportunities or entrants, threats of substitute products. So what are other people doing that could possibly outrule my business or take over my business and not make me as successful? And then buyer entry and exit costs. So like what it costs to switch someone over from an in-person training to online training and things like that. And then we also have financial too, which is startup costs, funding prices, sales projections. So I actually did like a 5-year projection statement. And then in my actual business plan, I looked at the 5-year growth of like what my business could potentially be. And it proved to be pretty marketable if I do things right. So that was nice to see. And then lastly, we have marketing, which is the target market. We have competition. So what other big brands are out there that could possibly like outrun my little business? We have things like Peloton and Gymshark does their own thing. Lululemon does their own thing, all these other big brands. I also talk about advertising and promotion. So how would I actually promote my business to get it off the ground and get people interested and get people looking? So there's things like Facebook ads, Instagram ads, ads on YouTube. Like there are so many routes you can go down to advertise a business nowadays. And then market stats too. So I did a bunch of research on where the market for online fitness companies are actually going. And it looked like within the next like 10 years or so, it's actually increasing in business, and it looks like it's doing really well, especially with COVID still going on. Business online has become huge. It's more accessible, it's more convenient, especially in the fitness business. People don't want to go to the gym, they don't want to leave their homes, they maybe can't leave their homes because of COVID. So online fitness businesses have really grown in the last 2 or 3 years with COVID. The second part of my capstone project here is actually creating a sample program. So for my business, creating programs for my clients is the biggest part. It's basically what runs my business and keeps it going. So knowing how to create a good program for a client goes hand in hand with starting this business. You can't really have a business in fitness if you don't know how to run like the services that you're providing. And the creation of a program for a client is very personalized, very methodical. Each program is basically handcrafted by me based on the needs, the wants, and the health status of the client. So this sample program that I've created kind of gives an inside look at the whole process behind creating a personalized client program for a client, which again is very important in order to keep a business like this running and clients coming back. So for the components of this, we have preparation, which involves initial client contact, so actually meeting the client. We have legal components and consent, which there are several legal components in the preparation that you need, as in a client trainer agreement. You need to have a liability waiver. So a lot of things like that, plus consent. They have to sign their consent to basically say, I'm accepting that I could possibly get hurt due to the environment of the market. So training with weights at home, maybe you drop it on your toe or something like that. They have to sign that consent to basically say they know what they're getting themselves into. And then health and fitness assessments. It's very important to do assessments for health and fitness because it shows the trainer, or me in this case, what the client can actually do, what they're capable of, and what their limitations are. And if the trainer doesn't know that, they can't properly train their clients. So it's very important in this preparation part. Designing the program is probably the funnest part I have with making these. It goes through the anatomy of the session. So warm up, the actual training part of it, and then the cool down. So that's kind of the anatomy of the session there. And then you have types of programs. So you have cardio training, you have weight training, you have flexibility training, neuromuscular training. Like there are so many programs that you can make for a client. Some will just choose one, so just cardio training. Some will choose multiple areas of work. So you have to really incorporate what the client wants and needs into that program. You have order of exercise. So a big example is like doing the hardest exercise first and the easiest exercise last. There are a lot of orders that you need to do an exercise session in order to get the most out of your training with the client there. And you have things, so going into the next one, like the client relations and client motivation. So client trainer communication is huge. If you do not have open, trusting communication with your client, you most likely will not get the best adherence out of them. So making sure that you have open communication and that you create a trusting environment for them is huge. And then you have things like goals. You want to make sure they're relevant, that they're time sensitive, and that they are like actually attainable for your clients. So you really go through those goals with them and make sure that it's the proper goal for them to have. And then motivation, you have things like overcoming barriers. There are a lot of social barriers, economic barriers, personal barriers that the client might need to help overcome. So you might have to be there to help them overcome those types of things. And then I included personal training style in here because every trainer is different. Every trainer will want to train in their own style and in their own way. And I've been in the fitness business for about 3 years now. So I've developed my own personal style with how I'd like to incorporate different motivation techniques into training, or how I'd like to actually go about training a client and how I talk to them. So it's very important that you do your research and you gain experience when training a client so that you can understand how you'd like to train as well. And that's really what this sample program kind of goes through is if you're creating an online business, how are you actually going to create and run the services that you're going to provide? So here I have just some pictures of like how it might look. So I've created these in Excel, and I have a lower body like example that I have. So you have the date for each week. You have the exercises over here, and you want to track the reps, the sets, and the weight for each client, because that will help them see progress. That will help them see how strong they're getting. That will help them see what they need to improve, or what they're doing good on. And then here over in the tracking metrics graph, this is actually someone's weight. So they started at about 218 and they got all the way down to 206. So tracking metrics like these are very important because her goal was to lose 10 pounds and she did much more than that. And having that track, like if we didn't track that, I mean, we could guesstimate, but having this, seeing the actual graph, it really helped motivate her. Like, wow, that line is going down really fast. Like now I want to keep going. And she's done very, very well in her program. And she's actually been a lot more motivated now to work out on her own, which is kind of the goal in the long run, is to get these clients almost to the same level of knowledge as you in a way, to be able to do this on their own and to be motivated. And it's a really cool feeling when you help someone out like that. So that's really why I wanted to make my own business out of this and be a change in the fitness industry. So just a quick little summary. When starting a business, you have to have a very solid foundation and a detailed business plan in order to really start this. I did not realize how much detail and how much work went into starting a business, but my business plan is like 15 pages I think, and there is probably a lot more that I can be adding as well. So it's very detailed, and as well as understanding and being very knowledgeable about your field and what you're trying to sell. And being passionate about it too. Like if I'm not passionate about this business, it's not going to go very far. So that's really important for the success of your business. So overall, this project really gives an inside look at what goes on in a business plan and what goes into selling a certain product. It's definitely helped me prepare to be a better business owner. So the next steps basically for this capstone project, after we've graduated and everything, is probably creating an actual website. to get this started, get this off the ground, a website where they can purchase the fitness packages that I provide. There will be several coaching packages, like just Zoom sessions that they can come to every week or whenever we plan them. There's also a fully online coaching package that I'll have, which includes weekly check-ins, full personalized programs that they can do every week, videos that they have access to help with form corrections and such. So there are different packages for that, and the website would highlight all of that. And possibly looking into an app developer. Unfortunately for this project and the amount of time we had, creating an app like that is not in the time constraint that I had. So an app developer would probably be the next step, to create possibly a client portal where they can see all of their metrics, where they can see their workouts, and a calendar of how many workouts they've done and such like that. So that would definitely be the next step. And then same with getting an LLC. My company would be a limited liability company. It would be me starting out this company, and I want to make sure that it's legal and that it's ready to go in all the right areas. So starting an LLC and getting that process going would definitely be the next step as well. And that is all I have. So any questions?
Thanks, Lauren.
Yeah.
So I would jump in and just say I really appreciated how comprehensive your overview was. Especially the next steps, so you plan on continuing this. So hearing about the next steps is really great. You've got a great audience for it, because I think both Dwane and Jon, are thinking about, certainly Jon, their own businesses. So you've actually got some good expertise in this audience that you could even tap into, especially thinking about that LLC piece and other things moving forward. So specific question for you is, what would you say is going to distinguish you from these other companies that have these, online fitness programs? Is your selling piece that is going to convince me to go with you as opposed to a larger organization?
Yeah, so that was actually one of the hardest things I had to come up with, because there are so many huge companies out there that sell all these great things, and everyone loves a brand name, like the Gymshark thing that they do. So I was like, what really does set me apart? And what I came up with is that I know all of my clients. A lot of these bigger brands don't really know who their clients are. They don't personalize to the extent that I personalize. So when you train with me, you get not only a relationship on a personal level, but you get it on that fitness level as well. So I know all of my clients. I'm able to connect with them in deeper ways than just, hey, do this exercise and there you go. I'm able to enjoy their progress with them and really motivate them on a personal level to have them make progress and have these goals completed. And same with my personalization. I put a lot of care and a lot of time into each program I've created, and I sit down with the person and I really make sure, hey, is this really what you're looking for? And every couple of sessions I ask, is this really what you're looking for? How do you feel about the workouts? And I feel like that really sets me apart from most of these big name brands. I personalize more, I care more. I'm really in it on the personal level and the fitness level with them. So.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lauren. Stephen?
Jon, you've got your hand up.
I do, but I'm completely willing. You can go first, Stephen.
Actually, Meg asked my major question, but I have a slightly different question, which you've sort of addressed a little bit. And I don't know, you say you've been in this field for some number of years, I think you said 3 years. So maybe you've experienced this, and that's on the motivational question. People get, oh, I know, I'm going to have a personal trainer. That's a good idea. I need to do something like that. And then they get into it. And then 3 weeks later, they sort of tire of the idea, and it's too much like hard work, or other things happen. Have you experienced sort of losing your clients losing motivation, and what do you do about that?
Yeah, so I've had a couple of clients that we start off really well. They're training like 3-4 days a week, and then they're like, oh, this came up, and now they're training once every other week, and then they aren't even a client anymore. So it happens a lot. Sometimes it's out of your control, and sometimes you're like, hey, why don't we have another meeting? Why don't we sit down? Why don't we talk about why you're not feeling motivated? Why aren't you, wanting to do this? Sometimes it's because they don't really see the benefits of fitness, which is why it's important to have client education and really sit your client down and be like, hey, this like fitness helps your body. Like you can live a more healthful life and have successful aging when you work out and you actually care for your body. And I've had a lot of cases where they're like, oh, okay, I didn't realize that fitness was more than just trying to lift a heavy weight off the ground. Like a lot of fitness people advertise that you want to like grow your glutes or just grow your biceps. It's a lot more than that. And that can be a catchy way to get them in. But once they realize that they are really helping their body in more ways than they think, they tend to be a little bit more motivated and want to train more. So
I really liked the notion that you put that graph in with that person's losing weight. I think that's a really good addition to your services here, because when you can visualize, when you actually see it, somehow that means more, right? So to the extent to which you can chart and graph everything and make that information available in that form, I think that's probably a good way to go. But anyway, it was a great presentation. Now I'm handing off to Jon.
Awesome. So this is actually less of a question thing and more of a maybe advice kind of thing. Have you done any customer discoveries, Lauren?
Explain what you mean exactly.
So these are talking with the people that you'd be selling these services to, especially the online component if you've been mostly doing it in person so far. So like if you talk to the different people, like make a list of them, maybe make them potential clients at the end of it, but talk to them like, okay, so what's your daily life like? Try to find the problem in a roundabout way.
Yeah, so a lot of my clients that I actually train in person now, their restraint is time. They don't have the time. They can't get to the gym. It's too far away, or stuff like that. So a lot of my clients, I'm like, how would online training be for you? And they would be like, oh my God, I love that so much. Like that would be so much better for my time and the way I work and how I work and stuff. I'm like, okay, that's good to know, because I'm thinking about doing the online side of it. And they're like, yeah, I would definitely love to sign up if it's online. Like I have all the equipment I need at home, and then I wouldn't have to leave my house, especially if they work from home. So does that answer your question a little bit?
That answers my first question. I've got a couple more for you just quickly.
Okay, go for it.
We should talk more at some point. Have you heard of the Simone Center? Have you used any of their resources? Have you been a part of any of their programs?
Sorry, repeat that one more time.
Simone Center. Have you heard of them? They're an RIT, they're the RIT entrepreneurship school.
Heard of it. Haven't really been that in touch. So that would definitely be something to look into, possibly before or after I graduate here.
Yeah, I would highly suggest that.
Yeah, thank you.
Another point, why an LLC and not a DBA?
I've done some research. I definitely do need to do more research about the LLC, but it kind of gives you more freedom to do what you'd like with the business. I can do it on my own. I believe it's like a one-time thing that you buy, or it's like once every year that you renew it or something. It does involve more paperwork, but it does give you more freedom to run the business how you'd like to run the business. So that was my biggest.
Is, I would say, even freer than that, but at the cost of you don't have limited liability. You are liable for everything that happens. So
that's very true. Yeah, it's definitely something I would look into for sure.
Yeah, LLC definitely provides more liability protection. You're really right. Which is, it makes sense, but I was just curious.
Yeah, no, I think I went more with the liability because it is online training. I'm not there spotting them. I'm not there correcting their form every second. So I felt like more liability might be better on my part. But it's definitely something to look into. Like if I find that the DBA would be better, you know, I'm willing to like
It's
look around
just,
and change that.
it's just cheaper is the
Yeah,
only thing.
no,
It's just
I
cheaper and
agree.
faster.
I agree.
So you could get a DBA tomorrow and an LLC next week. It's
Yeah.
kind of like the time. of things.
Yeah,
I've done the DBA in a day. You have to stand in line for 2 hours, but it is possible. The last
Gotcha.
thing I wanted to mention is if you're looking for an in-person space to do like some of these sessions, check out the Innovation Square. They've got a bunch of space out open. I've talked to the owner of that space and they're willing to cut deals, especially for businesses like yours, Lauren, where you don't pay rent for the first year, but instead like give them a proportion of the profit. And if so, if you needed an in-person space, look there. I know
Okay.
I took up way too much time with this. Thank you so
No,
much
it's okay.
for the
No,
questions.
thank you. That was very good insight. So I appreciate it.
I have a question, really quick question.
Yeah.
What marketing strategies have you thought about, or maybe, maybe you're thinking to implement for
Mhm.
promoting your business?
Yeah. So some things that I've already done now in promoting the in-person business that I have now, I post a lot of things on like Instagram, or now all the rage is TikTok and stuff. So
Mhm.
posting things like free workouts or free tips, or something funny about the fitness community, that really gets a lot of people like interested, like, oh, how did you do this move? So if I post the next day of like going through a movement and giving tips on how I actually do it, people love that. And they're like, hey, I saw you post all this fitness stuff. How do I train with you? And that's actually how I got most of my clients today, is just by being myself and posting on social media, which is kind of crazy. But other marketing strategies I've had is taking out ads. So Instagram, YouTube, Facebook ads they're like all the rage right now. So buying ads for that to actually promote like my business logo and my business out there. Those are like the main things I'm going for right now. So yeah,
Gotcha.
if
Yep.
that answers your question.
Awesome. Yep.
So much, John and Dwayne. Those are great questions and helpful information. At the Capstone Symposium, I would encourage you, Lauren, to maybe seek out both John and Dwayne and get contact information, because I think they both probably have a fair amount of experience and, helpful information for you. So staying connected with them, I think, would be beneficial.
Yeah, definitely.
And definitely seek out, someone in the Simone Center, because, SOIS does support students that want to get business coaching, and you can just get some general information through there. So definitely, check out that. And Dwayne, let's see your picture. This is exciting. Dwayne's got a picture
All
set up.
right.
Thank you, Lauren.
Yeah, thank you.
Let me share my screen here, bring that over there. Share. Oops. Maximize.
Lauren, you may need to stop sharing first.
Yeah.
in order-
Yeah, can you take yours down?
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
No problem. So that's one picture of my desk here.
Are those iPads?
Yeah. So this studio board is pretty cool, right? You buy the studio boards, but then you can use iPads
Very
to
cool.
make it more streamlined and touchscreen, which in this scenario here, if I were to buy the actual unit itself with its own screen that's touchscreen, it would cost significantly a lot more. So that's why I
Right.
went that route. And there's my setup there. That's a piece of it. You can see here I have the recording booth here for whomever it is that's recording, and then two computer monitors, studio monitors here. These are Yamaha. One of the boards, I pick the other board up sometimes if I'm not using it, and then a subwoofer here. And over here you'll see like there's a rack full of like hardware and equipment, and then here's the acoustic foam, the treatment right here, and so forth. And then hardwood floors, of course, for better acoustics.
Is this in your house, Dwayne?
Yes. Yep.
Wow. So you have this built or built this?
Yep. I built it. Actually, I built it from scratch. Believe it or not. Yeah, I
Wow.
built it from scratch, and I did it because my wife, she sings. She actually has a song on iTunes. So, but had kids, and that kind of ended that career. So, so
Well, maybe just derailed for a moment. I mean,
yeah.
you know?
And then, last but not least, my son here, he's playing around with it. So that's it.
Wow.
Wait, by all means, include those pictures in your as an appendix to your product paper. And
Oh, okay.
I would say the same, Lauren. If you would like to append your business plan to your product paper, that would be a good idea too.
Okay.
Okay, well,
Yeah, fantastic. And thank you, everybody, for hanging in there for a little bit longer, because it's always great. Stephen and I we could still be talking for the next hour or two, because we just love all the enthusiasm, and all three are clearly passion projects, and we really enjoyed hearing about them and learning from you all. Really proud of how you're finishing up the semester, all three of you. Three great presentations. Stephen, anything you want to say?
Thank you. Thank you.
yes, I think that's a record going beyond time, going 20 minutes over our hour. I don't think we've ever managed to do 20 minutes extra. Good for you guys for hanging in there, as Meg says.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot,
Yeah.
everybody.
Fantastic job. Good luck wrapping up this semester, and we'll see you on the 25th.
All right. Thank you.
Bye. Take
All
care,
right.
everybody.
Bye.
Take care.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Alex. Thanks for being there.
You gonna stay on, Meg?
Yep.
It's a fun time. Thanks both of you. It was nice presenting. I enjoyed
Yeah,
the first
John.
one. That
Great.
was definitely a fun time.
I'm gonna watch the progress of your project. I'm interested in it.
Oh yeah. It's going to be exciting in these next couple of weeks, Stephen. Honestly, we're going to. I mentioned it before, but this was our biggest roadblock in the past. Had been okay. So you say all these great things about this simulation technique, right? Where's the product? Now we have the product and data that supports the product, and it's working better than we had imagined. That's like the best case scenario.
Right.
So
That doesn't always happen.
does not always happen. Does not always happen. There's always a part of me that's like, we're going to make this. It's going to be taking a year to make this. We're going to make it. And it's not going to work, isn't it? And I was really concerned about that. And it was not the case. So I'm really happy about that.
Good for you. All right.
Thanks, John.
Peace. I'll sign off then.
Take care.
You as well.
All right, hold on one second.
We have another student, Alex.
Yep.
Hello, Alex. Oh, gone.
I just removed him.
Okay. So that was, they were, it always